Hey everybody, welcome back to yet another great interview for our virtual business summit. And today we're talking to Karen Seymour from Karen J. Seymour Digital Marketing. And we're going to be talking all about social media. How does it work? Why do we need to do it? All sorts of things about social media so we can really understand it, because we're in a very digital age and it's something that every company needs to be aware of. So without further ado, Karen, please tell us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today.
Well, my name is Karen Seymour. I am the CEO and social media strategist at Karen J. Seymour Digital Marketing. We work with typically B2B clients, small, medium-sized businesses, and we help them develop their social media presence, create leads, build their brand, etc., and grow their businesses overall.
Awesome. And tell us a little bit about, what we're going to be talking about today.
So today we're going to be covering a little bit more of like social media 101, like really getting back and dialing back and cutting through some of the noise and thinking a little bit more intentionally about why we're on social media, what channels we need to be using or should be using, and how to get our best bang for our buck and or our time and effort.
Absolutely. And I think the best way for us to go through this is to pick social media by social media and kind of dig into each one. So which one would you like to start with?
Well, I'll start with my least favorite. We'll start from the bottom. So Facebook, everybody's familiar with Facebook. Facebook has been the king of social media for, I think, most of our professional lives. And the reason for that is that Facebook was one of the first platforms to really start to intentionally create advertising channels for people who were on there. And they did that by gathering information about their users. We've heard a lot recently about privacy issues. But when it came to advertising, it was incredibly helpful to know sort of all of these personal details about the people that we were marketing to. Unfortunately, because of that, they have overstepped their boundaries a little bit, gone into a little bit of hot water, and they have changed their policies quite a bit. The upside with Facebook, the pros, are that your audience is going to be broad. Almost everybody in the world has some sort of Facebook account. It's a huge platform. You have huge access to people. The downside is that if you want to speak to people and you want to actually get your content to be seen, the best and quickest way to do so is to actually pay to play and actually use Facebook advertising as part of your marketing strategy.
Okay, so it's definitely good to know what it's good for and to understand the algorithm, because I know that they change an awful lot. And I think that's one of the things that frustrate people so much is that they think they figure it out and then something changes and now they're getting less response, but they don't necessarily know why. And then they get frustrated. And one of the examples could be that they change the way that they're hitting their people and what you have to pay for. So knowing those different intricacies is important. And I think the next thing I want to kind of get into, since we started off with talking about the idea of ads and such, the first thing is how do we create our presence on Facebook to begin with? So pages or whatever, how do we begin that?
So in order to create a Facebook page for your business, you do have to have a personal account. Your business page has to be connected to a person. So your first step is to go through your own personal profile and, go through the process and set up your own personal page, your business page, sorry. What's important to remember when you're setting up your business page is the brand that you're creating. And this goes across all of the social media channels. If you want to make sure that you're intentionally thinking about the product that you're offering or service that you're offering and who you're speaking to as you're setting that up, because you do have to include your website, maybe your Instagram channel. If you're on Instagram, think about your branding in terms of the header that you're using. Use your logo as your profile picture. There's certain things that you should be considering when you're setting that up, but always remember you have to go through a personal profile to set it up.
Okay.
And from there, then you can set up your advertising campaign.
Yeah. So when we're creating that business page, and you touched on one or two already, with like making the logo, your profile picture, but like, what are some key things that we want to make sure we do in our profile to make sure that we have it filled, for lack of a better word?
So one of the things to consider, and this might be the most important, is you want to make sure that you're thinking about what your audience is searching for. So, I think a lot of us have the urge to use flowery language or use, professional speak and sort of fill the space with, sort of elevated words, but don't really consider the fact that maybe that's not the language that your audience is using. So really start to think about, if you sell widgets, make sure that you put in that profile that you sell widgets. Otherwise, nobody's going to know. And that's really the one of the keys is to make sure that you're thinking about the keywords that you're using in your bio. And that's, again, across all of your social media profiles.
Okay. And making sure that we are concise and basically cover what we actually do.
You want people to know what you do. And then the second thing is, how can they contact you? What is your contact information? What is the next step after they look at your profile or they see a post that you've made? What do you want them to do afterwards? So you want to include a call to action and a link to your website in your bio as well.
Yeah, letting them know where to go, which I think is a really good point, because I know myself when I do social media and stuff, I tend to forget about the call to action, because I think when I come to social media, I'm in the headspace of like just putting content out, but I forget that we need to treat it exactly like you would a regular sale, where you have, an intro, a pitch, and then a close. And, I think bringing that mindset to social media is important, and making sure that we are trying to close because we are a business. And, like you said, covering the different things that we do and having the clear navigation of it is important. So now that we kind of have our page set up and some of the key things on there, I know you said ads are one thing that we do, and then posting is another. So, you were saying that Facebook restricts you if you don't pay. So, what kind of ads would we want to put out, or at least like what kind of ads are available, I guess would be a better way to say that. And then what kind of posts would we want to put out? Because it seems like they should be different.
Yeah, so typically with my clients, we do a lot of organic social media, meaning unpaid social media. So our focus is a lot on building communities and building interest in an organic way. Of course, paid is an amazing option, particularly on Facebook, like I mentioned before. So when if you've decided that you want to do ads, Facebook has a number of options, like maybe 10 different types of ads that you can run. So really, when you're coming down to making that decision, it's really important to think about how much money you want to invest, who you're speaking to, so that you can make sure that you're targeting your ads as specifically as possible. And what you're offering. Think about what you're offering. How is it going to appear? And how you want your audience to react. The important thing here too is when you're doing ads, I think we're all sort of like, I just want to do this as quickly as possible and move on to the next thing. But really, taking some time and thinking about what your audience actually responds to, maybe looking at your previous posts to see if your particular audience really loves GIFs or GIFs. Maybe you need to do an ad with that. If your audience really loves short videos of you speaking directly to the camera, then that maybe should be the ad that you go with. If your audience really likes still images with text over top, maybe that's the way to go as well. So it's one of those things where you have to really, look at your data, look at your past, see how your buyers have behaved in the past, and structure your content based on that.
Awesome. And that leads into like my next question, where like, how do we read those analytics when it comes to Facebook? Because I know each social media platform has their own way, but like, how do we find those? And then how do we interpret it in a way that makes sense to us?
So that is a super broad question. The short answer is that every social media platform has their own native analytics. So you're able to click over to the analytics tab and see how your posts are performing. Facebook lets you see, you can look at your data up to a year past to see how it's performing in terms of reach, impressions, clicks, etc. I think if there was one piece that you need to look at, that's really the most important KPI or a key performance indicator, it would be the engagement. You want to see, and engagement includes clicks, shares, likes, and comments. So, and saves on Instagram. So you really want to look at that and see what types of content are resonating the most with your audience. If you have a piece of content that you see this boost of engagement with, then look at that and see what the factors went into that particular post. And maybe that's the type of content you should be sharing in the future, and, putting your advertising dollars behind.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Instagram once or twice, and I know that Facebook owns Instagram, right?
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that in a second, but I did have one follow-up question to what you just said. So let's say I have a post and it did well and it had some comments or engagements. What are key things to look for to help me know what did well or what didn't do well? And you've mentioned a few with, like, obviously video and text on a picture are different, but like, what are some other things that I should be looking at to kind of read what happened?
Well, there's two parts to any content that you put out. It's the visual part and then the written part. So, taking a look at, well, I did an identical post 2 months earlier and I didn't have the same sort of response that I did with this post. Well, what's the difference? Maybe it's two video posts, but one did really well and one didn't, in terms of the engagement that it received. So maybe take a look at that and see, well, did I use music in this one and I didn't in this one? What kind of color scheme was I using in this one? Did it attract more attention? What type of content was I sharing? Really sort of getting a little bit granular and comparing apples to apples as much as you can to see what is the differentiator. What's the difference maker?
Absolutely. All right, cool. So really break it down as far as you can, and then keep record of it, I guess, if that was the first one ever, and see what continues to happen.
Yeah, I think people, the big part about marketing, and what I love about marketing, is it's a lot of science. So you're doing a lot of testing throughout. Mm-hmm. We're really looking for the most important factor, which is what is resonating with our audience. What do they consider valuable? What do they consider interesting? What is appealing to them? What kind of content and information can we provide them that actually makes a difference? And that's how you start to build a relationship with people.
Absolutely. That's awesome. All right. So then let's touch on Instagram, because like I said, that was one that you mentioned a few times, because it is tied into Facebook. How tied in is it to Facebook? And, are there a lot of differences from the two?
So Facebook owns Instagram as well as WhatsApp. So you definitely, let me restart that. Mm-hmm. Facebook owns Instagram. And so a lot of the analytics, the data, the algorithm changes are dictated by Facebook under the umbrella of Meta. We've all heard of Meta.
Mhm.
So the differences between Facebook and Instagram would be, for me as a marketer from that perspective, Facebook, the age range of people on Facebook is a little bit higher than you would see on Instagram. If your target audience is maybe 50 plus, then Facebook is definitely a place where you should be. If your audience is a little bit younger and they skew more towards like 30 to 50, Instagram is definitely the place for that. The other major difference is the types of content that you would share on those platforms. Instagram is very much, and we've all heard about Reels and the movement to Reels. So Instagram started off as a very visual platform, and it has transformed to a video platform more than anything else. Short form video. Whereas with Facebook, you can still share long form content. You can share links to blogs and articles. You can still do Facebook Lives. You can still post long form videos. Those are things that appeal to a Facebook audience more so than an Instagram audience.
Cool. Awesome. And you touched on a point that obviously we want to make sure that we people understand, is that each social media has its people, it's demographic wise, whether it's age, age, what they're interested in, how they consume their content, how they consume their interests. So, making sure that we understand that is definitely key. All right. So we talked about Facebook and Instagram and kind of gotten an idea of how to create our presence, how to put our presence out there, and how to start kind of engaging with them. And I think before we move on to the next social media, the last question I have, we touched on Facebook, we touched on Instagram, and I think with the Instagram, the next thing we should kind of talk about is that content, because you said it is different than Facebook. Reels being one of those things. I remember when they had Vines, which I think was like the first time you had like short form content. And I guess it was ahead of its time, because now at TikTok and all that, like it's come back. But tell us a little bit about Instagram and its content and what we can experience on there. Like I said, you mentioned Reels, but like what else is out there?
So Reels is where Instagram is really investing heavily right now. They have basically come right out and said, if you're not doing Reels, you're probably not going to get seen. So that, of course, for most of us gives us the heebie-jeebies, because like, oh my God, I got to do Reels. That's awful. I know most of my clients are like, oh God, what are we going to do? But there are different ways to incorporate Reels into your business strategy without having to dance on camera, because most of us don't want to do that either, in my age range. But, it is, there are different ways to engage and to use Reels. One of the important ways to use Reels, and one of the most effective ways, is to show your face. You don't have to be singing and dancing. You can just be talking. You can have, no voice and just have text rolling over. But it is a key to any Instagram marketing strategy is to include Reels. Mm-hmm. Reels is what's going to get you in front of a new audience. It's moving the needle in terms of adding to your followers. Stories are wonderful. It's a great way to re-engage with people who are already following you. But if you're trying to grow, invest in creating some Reels, or invest in somebody helping you create some Reels.
Okay, cool. And I didn't know that those two were separate. I thought Stories was Reels and Reels was Stories. So no,
I don't know if you remember IGTV. That was around for a little bit. And they recently sort of dissolved IGTV. So all video content posted natively is considered a reel. And then if you're doing an Instagram story, it kind of goes in another section of your feed.
Okay.
You have to intentionally decide you're watching stories as opposed to watching reels.
Okay, and that's good to know because when you're marketing, you want to know how to get in front of the new people or things like that. So knowing even just those differences of reels is what's going on. Again, harkening back to that whole, the algorithms are always changing. What's important is always changing. So you have to keep up with the adapting, which is why most companies hire someone like you, because there's no way to keep up with it. And when you're doing this by yourself, it's something that you try to gain as much knowledge as you can, but eventually you have to be able to hand it off to someone, because there's no way you're going to keep up with it and make sales. All right, so Instagram, the different places that you can post and how you can create it and how we can create our followers. Anything else you want to say on Facebook and Instagram before we move on to the next social media?
Yeah, if you are a product-based business, if you're selling a product, Instagram is 100% going to be helpful to you in moving the needle. I want to reinforce, and I'm sure we'll get to it at the end, you do not need to be on every single social media channel. Pick the ones that, serve you best, that you can consistently show up on, and that where your audience is. So think about where your audience is hanging out. Where are they spending their spare time? What are they looking for? And, maybe pick 2 or 3 of those channels and use those. If you're a product-based business, using Instagram and Facebook are really important. Instagram, probably I would recommend first if you're a product-based business. There are a lot of additional features that Instagram has added. You can shop directly on Instagram now. It's really a great space for B2C content. Direct links, you don't have to have 10,000 followers anymore to have links on your stories. Anybody can put links on their stories. Anybody can have a product catalog on there. It's really made itself very easy for people who are selling online. If you want to get directly to your consumer, I personally have bought things off of Instagram, and I don't think I know a single person who hasn't bought something directly from Instagram. So definitely something to consider. And then if you're a content creator, Instagram has also added a subscription model where you can actually have people pay you monthly to see some of your content. So if you're a hardcore content creator, a course creator, a teacher, instructor, anything of the sort, you can set it up where people are paying you to access your content.
Awesome.
And a lot of great features.
Yeah. And I know that there's a lot of different sites that came up for that as well. One of them that I'm familiar with is Patreon. And it does much the same thing, where you create content and you have people pay you a monthly subscription, if you will, like anything from $1 all the way up to as much as you want to charge. So that's cool that Instagram is implementing that, because I think that, something we're always supposed to think about as business owners is how can we compound what we're making back, and how can we compound what we're getting off of, stuff that we're doing. So, if we have content that we're putting together to market and try to get people in, if there's a way to make money off of that, even beyond just making sales, like that's awesome. And I think we need to always think about that when we're doing anything in business, because we all want to make more money, and the more you can make on whatever the investment is, the better. So that is really cool. What social media would you like to talk about next?
Well, how about good old Twitter?
Oh, Twitter. Okay. Yeah.
Crazy, right? You didn't think I was going there.
Well, it's also like Twitter, like, when it comes to anything in general, Twitter is one that I hear a lot politically or public figure wise, but I don't hear about it much with the business. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say about it.
So Twitter, yes, politically, during those, I don't know, hot potato times. I don't know what you would call that.
Craziness.
Dramatically. Crazy. It was craziness.
Yeah.
It kind of got a bad rap. You couldn't go on there without seeing some sort of something that was going to make you angry, whatever side of the aisle you're on. There was something on there to make you upset. So luckily, the execs at Twitter, and despite all of their buying and selling with Elon Musk and all that stuff in the background, they have continued to try to add features that would allow people to connect a little bit better on Twitter.
Okay.
So one of the things to consider about Twitter, and again, everything has pros and cons. It just depends on what you're looking for, is the pace. Twitter is incredibly fast. You post something on Instagram or Facebook and it has maybe a shelf life of 48 hours. You post something on Twitter, it has a shelf life of maybe 15 minutes. So you can get your thoughts out there pretty quickly, and get a response back pretty quickly and move on to the next thing. So again, if that is part of your selling strategy or sales strategy or marketing strategy, is like having, putting out opinions pretty quickly, Twitter is the place to be. The other thing that Twitter has is this Clubhouse. I call it a Clubhouse copy, but it's Twitter Spaces. It's essentially modeled after that Clubhouse surge that we had during the pandemic. I mean, at least for me, that was the first time I was on Clubhouse. But essentially, you set up a time and space to talk to somebody over the internet, over Twitter, and you can have people come in and they can listen to what you're saying, or you can actually bring them up to the podium to speak as well. So it's a great way to connect with your followers and establish yourself as well as a thought leader in your industry, and to keep up with people in the industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a really cool addition. Actually, one of my clients is running one right now as we speak.
That's cool. And I think that touches on one of the things about social media that I find works well, and like the people who apply it in more than just simply posting content or getting something out there, ones who interact on it with, whatever, this Clubhouse thing that you're talking about on Twitter, or going live
Twitter
on
Spaces.
Twitter Spaces. There you go.
Don't look up Clubhouse; it won't work. Twitter Spaces.
Or talking about going live on Facebook or things like that, where they're bringing more to it and more interaction, and that's really what social media is. It's a way to interact with a vaster, bigger number of people than you would on just a regular basis. And I think the more people take what they already know about networking and about making connections and just start really carrying it over to social media and understanding that that's really what we're trying to do. Now, there's a certain method to it that's a little different, where you want to put posts and kind of create more interest, but we're ultimately trying to do the same thing: create that conversation, get that interaction like you were talking about, and really trying to build a network online.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that people don't want to be sold to. You don't want to be sold to. I don't want to be sold to. I want to be listened to. So if you make your audience and your subscribers or your buyers or your potential customers or people who are just coming across your brand today feel like you're listening to them and that you actually care about what they have to say, that's what moves people to the next step. That's what drives people to continue to be interested in what you have to say or sell or whatever you might be doing. It's about creating that connection and networking with people. If you were at a networking event, you wouldn't just walk to somebody and say, "Hey, I sell phones," and not engage in any sort of conversation. It wouldn't work. You want to start to develop some sort of relationship, some rapport with somebody before you even ask them to buy something of yours or to take the next step, because they won't.
Absolutely. And I think that, applying that principle in any kind of sales that you're doing, but especially online, will get you in the right mindset to understand how long it might take or how things will be built on there. So anything else on Twitter before we move on to the next social media?
No, I think the thing to remember with Twitter is that it's an awesome way to provide customer support if you're able to, for your clients and your customers. A lot of us go on there to, if you had an issue with American Airlines, let's say, or Schmerican Schmerlines, let's pretend like it's a fake company. You go on there and you might, voice your complaint or, kind of ask for support in that way. A lot of companies, of bigger companies, and now smaller companies have some sort of support set up where their customer representatives are available on social media channels. And you really see that on Twitter because of the pace of Twitter.
Yeah, and how fast they can get back to you. My wife's done that a few times with Verizon and
Schmerizon.
yeah, Verizon. And
anybody out there is from Verizon.
and then a couple other companies. But
yeah,
it is an interesting way also to see how companies are adapting to using these, because people didn't think that you could use it as a customer service thing, and then one person used it and it ended up being a nice way to get back, because not only are you solving that issue, but also you can show that you're solving that issue. And I think that there's something freeing about that kind of openness, and being able to see, because that person might have been angry before, but if they see that they got resolved, now it's not second, third, fourth, eighth hand down of someone saying, I hate this company because they did this. You're actually seeing like, okay, whatever person says, I think that they solved your issue. That's pretty cool. So that's really cool. All right. So
it builds that trust factor too with that company, because you see like, oh, there's real people behind this. They actually care about what somebody has to say, even if they're complaining, and they're willing to spend some time and fix it.
Absolutely. All right. So what social media would you like to move on to now?
Well, this is the last of the big four, I would say, and this one is my favorite. It's LinkedIn. LinkedIn for many years had kind of a bad rap. It was a little bit boring and very much geared towards people who were on the job search. So it wasn't something that a company necessarily thought to invest too much time into, except when they were recruiting. But LinkedIn has evolved into the best networking channel or social media channel for B2B interactions. If your company, your target audience is made up of any sort of business, LinkedIn is a place to invest some time into. It is a huge networking channel. Speaking of networking, you can approach LinkedIn in the same way you would an event that you're attending. You can search people that fall into the industry that you're interested in breaking into, the company size that you're interested in breaking into, all the way down to the title of the person that you're interested in speaking to. You can search for people in that way and start developing a relationship with them. Again, just as I'm saying you would in person, you don't immediately reach out to somebody with a cold sell. It is really not going to work. People want to know, what can you do for me? So if you start off the conversation with, here's what I can do for you, or here's how I know you, or it was wonderful meeting you at X, Y, and Z, and you start the conversation authentically, you can start to build a real relationship with that person. Whether it be a customer relationship or a referral partner.
Absolutely. And I personally followed that exact story that you're talking about, because when I did my one business as a video marketing person, probably like a decade ago now, LinkedIn was exactly what you said. And it was just full of people saying, I'm excited to announce that I'm amazing and I did this. And I think we've all seen that post, and I did recently find out that that's an auto thing that you can do. So I think that's why it's always so consistent, because you can just click, oh, and then it formats it and puts it out there. But I had that same conception where LinkedIn was, not necessarily going to be helpful. And then, with what I'm doing now, I'm looking for businesses, and LinkedIn is integral to everything that I'm doing. It's pretty much the only way that I'm building things right now. And all these different things that you're talking about, where, you can connect with people better and build this connection, build the connections, nurture them and stuff. is exactly what's working for me. So let's kind of go a little bit in deeper with some of the things that you can do with LinkedIn.
So the first thing I would say with LinkedIn in terms of using it for your benefit is to make sure that your own profile is already ready to go. You want to make sure it's updated, that it reflects what you're doing now, so that if anybody comes over and looks to see, like they see a comment that you made and they come to your profile, it doesn't say, you know, what your career was 5 years ago or your skill set was 5 years ago, because we're all building, we're growing. We want to make sure that even though we're business owners, we want to make sure that our profiles reflect the type of business that we have, who we're talking to, who we want to talk to, and, you know, the transformation that we provide. So you want to have all that humble bragging, all that good stuff, you know, references, people saying nice things about you. You want to have that all set up on your profile before you even start. And the second thing is, if you have a business, you can build a LinkedIn business profile that connects directly to your sort of resume that you have set up on your LinkedIn profile page. If somebody looks and sees that, you know, it's Coach Bill at coachbill.com, they want to be able to click that link and it takes them to your company profile. And it doesn't matter if your company is 2 people or 2,000 people, having a business page adds just a little extra authenticity to your brand. And it's a place for you to actually really start to build out what your brand voice is, your brand tone, you know, who you're speaking to, and the services that you offer is through that page.
Awesome. Yeah. And I gotta think of where I was going. I'm good. I do have a call at 4, so we should be done in time, but just letting you know that we might just finish done and then I'm gonna jump off. But yeah, so yeah, that's really cool that they set that different piece up. And then I think that exactly what you're talking about is a great way to look at that too, where people might come to your profile to see what you've done, what you've accomplished, or where you're going. But from the business standpoint, it's nice to have that separate piece that gives more clarity on what that new thing you might be doing. Because if you have 7 or 8 different things that you've done in the past, the most recent is the one you're doing, you know, they might want to see more about the company as opposed to you. And we also need to remember that, like, it is your company, but it's separate from you. You know, it isn't you specifically. And the more we can separate ourselves just in that mentality of, you know, the company is its own entity, we're able to adapt that company to what goes on, but then also make that, you know, make it something separate. And that's important through all the different videos that you've been watching. We've touched on it a couple times that, you know, making sure that you understand that the company is one thing, you're another thing, you're putting your life energy into it, but you don't want it to suck your life energy out of you. And that, to get back to my point, basically having those 2 separate things is pretty cool to have on LinkedIn. So what else can we do on LinkedIn to help promote ourselves?
The other thing to think about is really start engaging. So if you go on there and you're reading an article about something in your industry and you find it interesting, write a comment. Don't just like it and move on to the next thing. If you want to engage with that person, if you want to start building a relationship with a person, actually write 2 or 3 lines in response, and be a little bit more intentional and thoughtful about the information that you're sharing and who you're connecting with. It really helps you to establish yourself as a thought leader in the space, as well as help you promote your business.
Absolutely. And that ties into what we've been talking about, where social media is an extension of the things that we all have done, you know, in our area, which is connect with local people, get referral partners, and make those direct sales. So by bringing that same mentality, we can do the things you're talking about, where you're commenting, and it'll help you understand the things you're supposed to comment about. Like you said, being genuine and actually listening to a conversation, because once people know that they can't be seen, like very John Cena, you can't see me. You know, once they realize they can't be seen, it changes their mentality when they make those comments. So remembering that we still need to have that, humanity to ourselves when we comment is a good point to make. And that goes with any social media across the board.
Yes.
So what else, anything else that we should be doing with LinkedIn, or, yeah, anything else that we should be doing with LinkedIn, or?
Well, to kind of wrap things up, I really want to emphasize across all social, whatever social media channels you decide to use for your business, to make sure that you're creating a profile that reflects you, that reflects your brand, your personal brand, as well as your business brand. And think about it as a total stranger walks up, opens a thing and sees your profile on there. What do you want that person to know? And what do you want that person to do next? So, the call to action, the next step doesn't necessarily have to be buy my thing. Maybe the next step is download my letter, download my workbook to learn more. The important, you're trying to make sure that you're providing value to everybody that comes across your profile, particularly the people who you want to work with. So think about how you're presenting yourself, how you're showing up. Showing up means engaging. It means commenting. It means listening, because you want that back. That's how you start to build a relationship, is you start to do the things that you want somebody to do for you.
Absolutely.
So that you mentioned the humanity. People are looking for connection. So if you're able to provide that, that could be the difference between you and somebody else. Them doing business with you or choosing somebody else, is that actual one-on-one connection that you can make.
Absolutely. And that helps us stand out from the crowd, because there's just so much white noise out there. Knowing how to distinguish yourself through identifying your brand, your personal thing, self, as you said, and then also what you stand for, and what your company is doing, and being genuine when you talk to people, are all different things that are going to make you separate from everyone else. Awesome. So to wrap up, what are some actionable steps that people should take when they're getting into social media, whatever brand it might be, but also just like, what are some first things that they should do?
The first thing to think about is, who is your audience? So before you decide what channels you want to be on, what types of content you want to post, take a real hard look at who you created your product or service for. What are the demographics? What do they look like? What are they interested in? What do they read? What motivates them? And think about how you can access them afterwards. We create our business because we want to sell something, whether, again, it's a product or a service, we're selling something. So think about who that person is that we're selling to. What is the transformation? What's the value add of our product or service? And then think about what social media channels you should be on. And again, you don't have to be on all of them. I think there's a lot of pressure and, like you said, a lot of noise out there to join all the things and do all the things. It's unsustainable. Mm-hmm. So pick 1 or 2 or 3 lanes. If that's within your, capacity, you can deal with those and get really good at those. And then, you don't have to think about like, but what about YouTube? But what about Pinterest? But what about? Think about where your audience is, focus on that, and do your best work and give all the value you can on those networks.
Absolutely. And that's great advice, because too many people try to do too many things. And that's usually the companies that run out of money quicker than anybody else.
And you run out of bandwidth.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And you burn out.
You burn out. Yeah.
Physically just can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So we really unpacked a lot of stuff in this interview. And I think that we really touched on social media and what people need to be thinking about when they get into it. And I think one last thing I wanted to add is that when you do social media and you're building your brand as a company, you need to realize that it's not something you can maintain by yourself. Eventually, you will have to get someone else to help you take care of it because of all the things we mentioned, the bandwidth, the constant interaction, all the stuff that you need to do. So much like everything in business, you should be going into this understanding that at some point someone else is going to be taking it over. With that said, thank you so much, Karen, for joining us and walking us all through this. And everybody, we will see you at the networking event tonight at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time.